At my daughter-in-law's baby shower, I overheard her say, "Once I get my hands on the inheritance, I'll divorce him and disappear." I revealed my husband's will letter. The next day, she begged for forgiveness. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." I never thought I'd hear those words at my own home, especially during what was supposed to be a joyful celebration. But life has a cruel way of revealing truths when you least expect them. My name is Aurora Wilson, and at 67 I believed I had seen enough of life to recognize sincerity from deceit. Yet somehow Clare, my son Thomas's wife of 3 years, had managed to fool us all. Until today. The baby shower had been my idea. I wanted to celebrate my first grandchild properly, with all the trimmings. Delicate finger sandwiches, pastel-colored decorations, and a house full of well-wishers. Clare, 7 months pregnant, had been gracious about letting her mother-in-law take charge, which I now realize should have been my first clue. "Do you need any help with those, Aurora?" Jenny, my neighbor of 20 years, asked as I carefully arranged another tray of salmon canapés. "I've got it under control," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "But could you check if we're running low on those little cream cheese sandwiches?" The April afternoon light flooded through my kitchen windows as women chatted in the living room. Thomas had made himself scarce, escaping to a golf game with his friends. Smart man. I smiled, thinking of how excited he was about becoming a father. My late husband James would have been so proud. I needed more napkins for the dessert table and remembered the stack I'd stored in the garden shed. As I stepped onto the stone path leading to the back of the property, I heard Clare's voice drifting from behind the rose trellis. "It's all working out perfectly," she was saying, her voice lower than her usual cheerful tone. I slowed my steps, something in her cadence making me pause. "How much longer do you have to keep this up?" another voice asked. Lisa, Clare's college friend who had flown in for the shower. Clare laughed, a sound so different from the sweet giggle she used around Thomas that it sent a chill down my spine. "Just a few more months. Once the baby comes, Thomas gets his inheritance. His father's will was very specific about providing for the next generation." Clare's voice dropped even lower, forcing me to step closer to the trellis. "After that, I'll have access to the accounts as the mother of his child." "And then?" Lisa prompted. "Then, after I get my hands on the inheritance, I'm filing for divorce and getting out. Thomas is sweet, but so boring. I'll take the money and disappear." My hands went numb. The decorative napkins I'd been holding fluttered to the ground, but I barely noticed. Blood rushed to my ears as I stood frozen in place. "What about the baby?" Lisa asked, sounding slightly concerned. "I'll have primary custody, of course. That means child support on top of everything else. Thomas will pay dearly for his happy little family fantasy." The casual cruelty in her voice made my stomach turn. I'd had my reservations about Clare from the beginning. She seemed too perfect, too eager to please. But Thomas had been so in love, and after losing James 5 years ago, I'd been grateful to see my son happy again. I'd ignored my instincts, telling myself I was just being an overprotective mother. Now I knew better. "Aurora? Did you find those napkins?" Jenny's voice called from the kitchen door, startling me. I quickly bent down to retrieve the fallen napkins, my hands trembling. "Coming," I called back, forcing a steadiness I didn't feel into my voice. I don't know how I made it through the rest of that party. I moved through the motions like an actress playing a role, smiling, serving tea, exclaiming over the tiny baby clothes and thoughtful gifts, all while watching Clare accept congratulations with practiced modesty, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. My grandchild, my son's child, a baby being used as a pawn in a cruel scheme. Every time Clare met my eyes and smiled, I wondered how I could have missed the calculation behind her gaze. Every time she touched Thomas's arm when he returned from golf to join the celebration, I saw the invisible timer she had set on their marriage. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" Thomas asked as the last guests were leaving. You look pale. Just tired, dear, I said, patting his cheek. My beautiful, trusting son. It's been a long day. Clare appeared at his side, slipping her arm through his. You did too much, Aurora. You should have let me help more. The concern in her voice sounded so genuine that for a moment, I almost doubted what I'd heard. Almost. Thank you, Clare, I said, meeting her eyes. But I've always believed that a mother should do whatever it takes to protect her family. Something flickered in her expression. Confusion, perhaps a trace of unease. But it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. That night, alone in my bedroom, I pulled out James's last letter to me, the one that came with his will. Trust your instincts, Aurora, he had written. You've always been wiser than I am about people. I hadn't trusted my instincts about Clare, and now my son was headed for heartbreak. I thought of the grandchild growing inside her, innocent and unaware of being nothing more than a means to an end. Sleep evaded me as I stared at the ceiling, replaying Clare's words over and over. By morning, grief had hardened into resolve. Thomas might be blinded by love, but I wasn't. And I still had one card to play, the truth about James's will, which Clare had badly misunderstood. The real question was, how far would I go to protect my son and grandchild from the web of lies? Clare had spun. 3 nights passed without sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, Clare's words echoed in my mind. After I get my hands on the inheritance, I'm filing for divorce and getting out. I would jolt awake, my heart racing, wondering if I should tell Thomas immediately. But what if he didn't believe me? Clare had spent 3 years crafting her image as the perfect wife. Thomas adored her. If I came to him with an accusation this serious based on an overheard conversation, he might dismiss it as his mother's paranoia. Or worse, it could create a permanent rift between us. The 4th morning after the baby shower, I sat at my kitchen table nursing a cup of tea, watching the sunlight play across the garden. The rose trellis where Clare had revealed her true self stood innocently in the distance. I needed more than just words caught on the breeze. I needed evidence. You're sure about what you heard? Martha asked that afternoon. We'd been friends for 40 years, and she was the only person I trusted with this. We sat in her sunroom, surrounded by potted orchids and the scent of lemon polish. Completely sure, I said. It wasn't a snippet taken out of context. She laid out her entire plan. Martha frowned, tapping her fingers against her teacup. Have you noticed anything else suspicious about her? I started to say no, but stopped myself. Had there been signs I'd ignored? She's always been very interested in our family finances, I said slowly. I thought she was just being practical, and she asked a lot of questions about James's will after they got married. That could be innocent, Martha pointed out. There's more, I continued, memories surfacing. She was eager to get pregnant right after they married. Thomas was thrilled, of course, but now I wonder if she knew about the inheritance clause. James had been traditional in his planning. His will specified that a significant portion of the family assets would transfer to Thomas upon the birth of his first child. James believed in providing for the next generation. Clare must have learned about this provision somehow. I need to look into her background, I decided. Martha raised an eyebrow. Private investigator? Nothing so dramatic, but I can do some digging. I started that evening with a simple internet search of Clare Donovan, her maiden name. Nothing unusual appeared. College graduation announcements, a LinkedIn profile for her brief career in marketing before she met Thomas. But when I searched deeper, using her middle name Elizabeth, something interesting surfaced. A small article in a local paper from her hometown in Oregon. It mentioned Clare's engagement to a local business heir 5 years ago. An engagement that had apparently been broken off. Thomas had never mentioned Clare being engaged before. When they met, she'd told him her previous relationships had been nothing serious. The next day, I called my niece Rebecca, who worked in tech and had a knack for finding information. Can you find anything about Claire Elizabeth Donovan from Portland? Particularly any relationship with someone wealthy about 5 years ago? Rebecca didn't ask why. Another reason I loved her. Give me a day or two, she said. 2 days later, Rebecca sent me a file. Claire had indeed been engaged to William Harrington, whose family owned a chain of car dealerships in the Pacific Northwest. The engagement had ended abruptly, with no explanation in the society pages that had once eagerly announced their relationship. More disturbing were the other relationships Rebecca had uncovered. Before William, there had been Victor Chen, son of a real estate developer. And before him, a brief relationship with an older man who had recently divorced and received a substantial settlement. A pattern was emerging, and it made my blood run cold. Claire had a history of attaching herself to wealthy men. None of the relationships had lasted. And her social media accounts from those periods showed a woman who enjoyed the finer things: designer clothes, exotic vacations, expensive restaurants. All things she had claimed to care little about when dating Thomas. "I'm a simple girl at heart," she'd told him. I remembered how refreshing he'd found her apparent lack of materialism after dating women who seemed more interested in his family name than in him. I stopped by Thomas and Claire's house unannounced the next day, claiming I was dropping off leftover containers from the shower. Claire answered the door in yoga pants and one of Thomas's old college sweatshirts, looking every bit the contented, expectant mother. "Aurora, what a nice surprise," she said, giving me a warm hug. I hugged, her back feeling her pregnant belly press against me. My grandchild. Despite everything, that fact remained true. "I brought back your serving platters," I said, following her inside. Their home told a story. Photos of Thomas and Claire covered the walls. Claire had insisted on redecorating shortly, after moving in. I noticed something I hadn't before. In almost every picture, Claire was adorned with something expensive. The watch Thomas had given her for their first anniversary, the diamond earrings for her birthday, the designer handbag she didn't ask for but had mentioned admiring in a magazine. "Would you like some tea?" Claire asked. "That would be lovely." As she moved around the kitchen, I noticed how perfectly she played the role of the devoted wife. If I hadn't heard her confession, I would never have suspected. "How are you feeling about becoming a grandmother?" she asked, setting a steaming mug before me. "I can't wait," I said truthfully. "Family means everything to me." Something flashed in her eyes. Caution, perhaps. "To me too," she said, but her hand drifted to the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, adjusting it slightly. "Thomas mentioned you might be selling the lakefront property," she said after a moment, trying to sound casual. "He's always loved that place." I hadn't discussed selling any property with Thomas. This was Claire fishing for information. Did he? How strange. "I have no plans to sell." Claire's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I must have misunderstood. As I drove home, a heaviness settled in my chest. The evidence was mounting, but I still hesitated to confront Thomas directly. He was so happy about the baby. How could I shatter that happiness without absolute proof? The answer came to me as I pulled into my driveway. I wouldn't confront. Not yet. Instead, I would set a trap, one that would reveal Claire's true intentions to Thomas in a way he couldn't deny. I picked up my phone and called Claire. "I've been thinking," I said. "We should have a family dinner this weekend. There are some financial matters we should discuss before the baby arrives." "That sounds perfect," Claire replied, unable to keep the eagerness from her voice. "I'll tell Thomas." The trap was baited. Now I just had to wait and see if Claire would take it. The morning of our family dinner, I woke with a strange calmness. I'd spent decades putting others first. James, Thomas, the family business we'd built together. Now, at 67, I was Preparing for a confrontation I never imagined having, I called Thomas first thing. "Could you come by early to help me set up? I need to move some serving dishes from the high shelves." "Sure, Mom. Claire has a prenatal appointment anyway. I'll come around 4. Perfect. I needed time alone with my son." When Thomas arrived, looking so much like his father with his warm eyes and easy smile, my resolve nearly faltered. He was hanging his jacket in the entryway when I noticed the dark circles under his eyes. "You look tired, sweetheart," I said, touching his arm. He ran a hand through his hair. "Just stressed about work, and the nursery renovations, and becoming a dad." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. We moved to the kitchen where I was preparing. A roast, Thomas's favorite. As he reached for the glasses on the top shelf, I watched him carefully. "Is everything all right between you and Claire?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. His shoulders tensed slightly. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" "No reason. You just seem worn out." Thomas sighed, setting the glasses down. "It's nothing. Claire's been a bit particular lately. Pregnancy hormones, I guess." "Particular how?" He hesitated. "She's been asking a lot about finances. The inheritance, specifically. I told her we're comfortable, but she keeps pushing for details." He shook his head. "I don't know why she's so concerned about money suddenly." My heart sank. Claire was getting impatient. "I'm sure she's just thinking about the future," I said, though the words tasted bitter. Thomas nodded, but doubt lingered in his expression. "She's been different lately. More focused on what we have than who we are." He looked embarrassed. "Sorry, that sounds ungrateful. She's carrying our child." "I shouldn't complain." I touched his hand. "It's okay to have concerns, Thomas." He squeezed my fingers. "Thanks, Mom. Anyway, what's this dinner about? You mentioned financial matters?" This was my opening. "I thought we should discuss some aspects of your father's will before the baby arrives. There are details you and Claire should understand." His brow furrowed. "What details? I thought everything was straightforward." "Not exactly." I took a deep breath. "Your father made specific provisions that might surprise you both." Before I could continue, the doorbell rang. Thomas glanced at his watch. That must be Claire. Her appointment must have finished early. Claire swept in wearing a floral maternity dress that highlighted her growing belly, her hair perfectly styled. Despite the exhausting doctor's appointment, she immediately began describing. She kissed Thomas, then embraced me with practiced warmth. "Something smells divine, Aurora," she said, her eyes scanning the room as if taking inventory. "And you've set the table with the good china. This must be a special occasion." Her eager tone confirmed my suspicions. She thought tonight was about the inheritance. "In a way, it is," I replied, matching her smile. "We have important matters to discuss." Throughout dinner, Claire was charming, asking about my garden club and commenting on how the roast was perfectly cooked. But I noticed her impatience in small tells, the way she tapped her fork slightly between bites, how her eyes kept darting to Thomas whenever the conversation lulled. Finally, as I served coffee in the living room, Claire set down her cup with deliberate care. "So, Aurora, you mentioned financial matters to discuss?" Her voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes were sharp. "Yes," I said, settling into James's old leather chair. "With the baby coming, it's time to clarify certain aspects of our family arrangements." Thomas leaned forward. "Mom was about to explain something about Dad's will before you arrived." Claire's expression brightened. "Oh? I thought everything transferred to Thomas when the baby was born." She placed a protective hand over her belly. "That's what Thomas mentioned." I nodded slowly. "That was the general understanding. But there are specifics that neither of you are aware of." Claire's smile froze. "Specifics?" "Your father," I said, turning to Thomas, "was very wise about protecting family assets. He understood that circumstances change. People change. Claire shifted uncomfortably. The provision about the baby triggering the inheritance is correct, I continued. But what Thomas doesn't know is that the bulk of the estate isn't transferred directly to him. Claire's knuckles whitened around her coffee cup. What do you mean? James established a family trust. While Thomas will have access to certain funds after the baby is born, the house, the lake property, and the majority of investments remain in the trust, which I continue to manage. The color drained from Claire's face. For how long? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Until the child turns 25, I said, or under certain other conditions. What conditions? Thomas asked, looking confused. In case of divorce, for instance, the trust is designed to protect the child's interests primarily. Neither parent would have direct access to the principal. Claire set her cup down so forcefully that coffee sloshed over the rim. That's ridiculous. Thomas is nearly 40. Why would James infantilize him like that? Thomas looked at his wife with surprise. Claire, it's not unusual. It's just to protect family assets. From whom? She snapped. From me? The room fell silent. Her reaction was too intense, too revealing. Thomas stared at her. No one said that. Why would you think it? Claire realized her mistake and backpedaled. Quickly. I just meant, it seems unfair that you don't have full control over your inheritance. She tried to soften her tone, but the damage was done. I reached into the drawer of the side table and pulled out an envelope. There's more. Your father left a letter to be opened before the birth of your first child. Claire's eyes locked onto the envelope as if it were a snake about to strike. I handed it to Thomas, who opened it with steady hands and began to read aloud. Thomas, if you're reading this, you're about to become a father, and nothing will ever be the same. It's the greatest joy and the greatest responsibility. I've structured our family assets to protect not just you, but the generations to come. Trust your mother. She sees people clearly, even when love might blind you. And remember that true. Wealth isn't in bank accounts or property deeds. It's in knowing who will stand beside you when everything else falls away. Thomas looked up, his expression thoughtful. Claire's face had gone completely still. He knew, I said softly. He knew. Someday someone might want you for the wrong reasons. Claire stood abruptly. I need some air, she mumbled, heading for the patio doors. Thomas watched her go, then turned to me, confusion and the first shadows of suspicion crossing his face. Mom, what's really going on? Thomas, I said, leaning forward. There's something you need to know about Clare. His expression shifted from confusion to wariness. Mom, if this is about you not liking her, it's not about my feelings, I interrupted gently. It's about what I overheard at the baby shower. I told him everything. Claire's conversation with Lisa behind the rose trellis, her plan to take the inheritance and leave. With each word, Thomas's face grew paler, his jaw tighter. That can't be true, he said when I finished, but his voice lacked conviction. Claire wouldn't. She loves me. I wish I were wrong, I said. That's why I didn't tell you immediately. I wanted to be sure. Sure of what? That my wife is using me? His voice cracked. I looked into her past, Thomas. There's a pattern. I handed him the folder Rebecca had compiled. 3 wealthy men before you. Each relationship ended once she realized the money wasn't easily accessible. Thomas stared at the documents, recognition flickering in his eyes. She never mentioned being engaged before. She told me her ex-boyfriends weren't serious. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. I need to hear this from her. Just then, the patio door slid open, and Claire returned. Her composure was back, though her eyes were wary. She'd clearly used the time outside to collect herself, not realizing what conversation had occurred in her absence. Sorry about that, she said with a thin smile. Pregnancy makes me emotional sometimes. Thomas looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Does it make you dishonest too? Claire froze. What? Mom heard you at the baby shower, Claire. Thomas's voice was dangerously quiet. Talking to Lisa about taking the inheritance and divorcing me. Claire's face went from shocked to calculating in an instant. That's ridiculous. Aurora must have misheard. Why would I say that? Because that's your pattern, Thomas said, holding up the folder. William Harrington, Victor Chen. Did you love them too? Or were they just not wealthy enough? Claire's mask slipped. Rage flashed across her face before she controlled it. She turned to me, eyes narrowed. You've never liked me. You've been poisoning Thomas against me from the beginning. Actually, I said calmly, I wanted to like you. I wanted to believe you made my son happy. I do make him happy. Claire's voice rose. Thomas, you can't possibly believe this. Your mother is manipulating you because she can't stand not being the most important woman in your life. Thomas shook, his head looking tired. Stop it, Claire. Just stop. You're choosing her over me? Over us? Claire placed both hands on her belly dramatically. I'm choosing the truth, Thomas said. And I think deep down, I've suspected something wasn't right for a while. The constant questions about money, pushing me to ask Mom about the will. Because I care about our future, Claire was shouting now. About the baby's future. No, Thomas said. You care about what you can take. Claire's strategy shifted instantly. Her face crumpled and tears welled in her eyes. How can you say that? I'm carrying your child. The sudden transformation was so practiced, so artful, that I almost admired. Her skill. Almost. Yes, you are, I interjected. And that child will always be part of this family, regardless of what happens between you and Thomas. Claire glared at me with naked hatred before turning back to Thomas, voice softening. Baby, please. Your mother misheard. Whatever she thinks she heard, it's not true. You know me. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Do I? Because the woman I thought I married wouldn't care about trust funds and inheritance clauses? She wouldn't. Be upset about protections for our child. I'm not upset about that, Claire protested. Then why did you react the way you did? Thomas asked. Why have you been asking about the inheritance almost daily for the past month? Claire's tears dried up instantly. She straightened, her expression hardening. Fine. You want the truth? I didn't sign up for this. I thought I was marrying into money, not a financial hostage situation. She glared at me. And I certainly didn't expect a mother-in-law who controls everything. The rawness of her admission hung in the air. I expected to feel vindicated, but instead, I just felt sad. Sad for Thomas. Sad for the child who would be born into this mess. You should leave, Thomas said quietly. Leave? Claire laughed bitterly. And go where? I'm 7 months pregnant. You can stay at the Oakwood condo until we figure things out, Thomas said. But I can't be around you right now. Claire looked from Thomas to me, calculating her options. Finally, she grabbed her purse. This isn't over, she said. That's still your baby I'm carrying. You can't just discard me. No one is discarding you, I said. But you can't manipulate your way out of this, Claire. After she left, Thomas collapsed onto the sofa, his face in his hands. I sat beside him, putting my arm around his shoulders. I'm such a fool, he whispered. No, I said firmly. You're someone who believed in love. That's never foolish. We sat in silence for a while, the clock ticking steadily in the background, marking the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. What happens now? Thomas finally asked. We protect the baby, I said. Your father made sure of that at least. Claire won't get access to the family money no matter what. She'll fight, Thomas said. Let her. I squared my shoulders. I've been protecting this family for 45 years. I'm not stopping now. Thomas looked at me with new respect. You knew exactly what would happen tonight, didn't you? Revealing the trust details, having Dad's letter ready. You set a trap. I nodded. I needed you to see her reaction, to hear it from her directly. Thank you, he said, squeezing my hand. For not just telling me she was horrible, for letting me see it myself. After Thomas left, promising to call me in the morning, I wandered through my quiet house. The dinner dishes still sat on the table, the evening having taken such an unexpected turn that cleaning up seemed irrelevant. I picked up a framed photo of James that sat on the mantel. You were right, I told his smiling face. I should always trust my instincts. I'd won this round, but I harbored no illusions that Claire would give up easily. She was still carrying my grandchild. She would still be in our lives in some capacity. The confrontation was over, but the war had just begun. The next morning, I was sipping my first cup of tea when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found Claire standing there, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual perfect styling. "We need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse. I stepped aside to let her in, noting how different she looked, smaller somehow, less polished. But I reminded myself that Claire was an accomplished actress. She sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded over her belly. "I made a terrible mistake," she began. "Which one?" I asked, remaining standing. "Marrying my son for his money or getting caught planning to leave him?" Claire flinched. "I deserve that. But please, Aurora, I need you to listen." I crossed my arms, waiting. I did have plans. When I first met Thomas, she swallowed hard. But things changed. I changed. How convenient that you've had this revelation after being exposed. Tears filled her eyes. I know how it looks, but I swear to you I do care about Thomas. And this baby. She looked down at her belly. I never expected to feel this way about being a mother. I'd heard enough fake apologies in my life to recognize the signs of manipulation. But something in her voice gave me pause. "Thomas is heartbroken," I said. "And you're the last person who can comfort him right now." Claire nodded, wiping away tears. "I know. I need a chance to fix this, to prove I can be better." "Why?" I asked bluntly. "The money isn't accessible. Your plan failed." "Why stay?" "Because despite everything, I do love him," she whispered. "I didn't expect to, but I do." I studied her face, searching for the telltale signs of deception. But all I saw was exhaustion and something that looked remarkably like genuine remorse. "Please," Claire said, meeting my gaze directly. "Tell me what I can do to make this right." I stared at Claire's tear-streaked face, searching for any sign that this was just another performance. After decades of watching people, first as a teacher, then as James's partner in business and life, I'd developed a keen sense for insincerity. But the woman before me seemed genuinely broken. "You understand why I can't just take your word for this," I said finally. Claire nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I do. I've given you no reason to trust me. Or Thomas," I added pointedly. Her shoulders sagged. "Or Thomas." I moved to the kitchen and put the kettle on, not because I particularly wanted tea, but because the familiar ritual gave me time to think. Claire followed, settling awkwardly at the kitchen table. "Thomas won't speak to me," she said. "He's moved some clothes to the condo and told me I could stay at the house until we figure things out." "What did you expect?" I placed 2 mugs on the table. "You were planning to use him, take his money and disappear with his child," Claire flinched. "I know how it sounds. It sounds exactly like what you said behind the rose trellis." I poured hot water over the tea bags. "What changed, Claire?" And please don't insult my intelligence by claiming you never said those things. She wrapped her hands around the mug I offered, seeming to draw comfort from its warmth. I did say them, she admitted quietly. When I met Thomas, I saw him as a target, just like the others. At least she wasn't denying it anymore. That was something. But Thomas was different, she continued. He didn't show off his wealth or use it to control me. He cared about what I thought, what I wanted. Her voice broke slightly. No one had ever really seen me before. I raised an eyebrow. So you're saying you fell in love despite your scheme? I know it sounds like a convenient excuse. Claire met my gaze directly. But yes, at some point I stopped pretending and started actually feeling. And now. She placed a hand on her swollen belly. This baby has become real to me. Not just a means to an end, but my child. Our child. I sipped my tea, considering her words. Why tell me this instead of Thomas? Because he won't listen to me right now, but he'll listen to you. Her eyes pleaded with me. I'm not asking you to lie for me or even to forgive me. Just give me a chance to prove this isn't an act. And if I don't believe you? Claire straightened. Then I'll have to find another way to prove it. But I'm not giving up on my family. Her determination was impressive, I had to admit. Either she was telling the truth, or she was an even better manipulator than I'd thought. I'll think about it, I said finally. That's all I can promise. After Claire left, I called Martha. She listened patiently as I recounted the confrontation with Thomas and Claire's unexpected visit this morning. Do you believe her? Martha asked when I finished. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to, for Thomas's sake and the baby's. But I'd be a fool to trust her so easily. What does your gut tell you? I closed my eyes, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions. That she's not being entirely honest, but not entirely dishonest either. People are rarely all one thing, or another, Martha said wisely. Even manipulators can have genuine feelings. So what do I do? Test her, Martha suggested. Not with words, but with actions. See if she's willing to put something real on the line. The idea stayed with me as I went about my day. By evening, I had a plan. I called Thomas first. Mom, I've been thinking about what to do, he said before I could speak. Claire wants to try counseling. And what do you want? I asked. He sighed heavily. I don't know. Part of me wants to believe she's genuine, for the baby's sake, if nothing else. I understand. And I did. Despite everything, he still loved her. Claire came to see me today. She what? His voice sharpened. What did she want? To apologize. To convince me she's changed. And did she? I'm reserving judgment, I said. But I have an idea, if you're willing. I outlined my plan. Thomas was skeptical, but agreed it might give us clarity. Next, I called Claire. I've been thinking about our conversation, I said. I'm willing to give you a chance to demonstrate your sincerity. Anything, she said quickly. Just tell me what to do. Come to dinner tomorrow night, both you and Thomas. There's something important we need to discuss. Of course, she agreed. Thank you, Aurora. The next evening, I prepared a simple meal, nothing elaborate like the previous dinner, just comfort food that reminded me of family meals when Thomas was growing up. As I set the table, I found myself praying that my instincts were correct. For all our sakes. Thomas arrived first, looking tired but resolute. Are you sure about this, Mom? No, I admitted. But it feels like the right thing to do. Claire arrived 15 minutes later. She'd made an effort to look presentable, but there was none of her usual polish. Her hair was simply styled, her makeup minimal. She looked younger, more vulnerable. Dinner was a quiet, somewhat strained affair. Thomas was polite but distant. Claire tried a few times to engage him in conversation, but eventually gave up, focusing instead on answering my occasional questions about her prenatal care and the nursery preparations. After we finished eating, I invited them to the living room. Claire sat on the edge of the sofa, clearly nervous. Thomas took the armchair, leaving a deliberate space between them. "I have a proposition," I said, sitting across from them. "Something that might help us move forward." They both looked at me expectantly. "Thomas told me you suggested counseling, Claire. I think that's a good start." Claire nodded eagerly. "I've already found someone who specializes in marriage therapy and prenatal psychology." "That's commendable," I acknowledged, "but I think we need something more concrete." I pulled out a folder and handed it to Claire. "This is an amended prenuptial agreement. My lawyer drew it up today." Claire's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "But we already have a prenup." "This one is different." I leaned forward. "It stipulates that in the event of a divorce initiated by you within 10 years, you forfeit all rights to any family assets. Child support would be determined by the court, but no alimony, no property rights, nothing beyond what you brought into the marriage." Claire paled as she scanned the document. "If you're truly committed to this marriage, to Thomas and not his money, this shouldn't be a problem," I continued. "But if you're still harboring thoughts of taking the inheritance and running, this makes that impossible." Thomas watched Claire intently, his expression guarded. Claire read through the agreement slowly, then looked up. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. "Is there a pen?" The room seemed to hold its breath as I handed her my fountain pen, the one James had given me on our 25th anniversary. I half expected her to object, to argue, to find some loophole. Instead, she signed her name with a firm hand, then passed the document to Thomas. "I'll sign it." "Too," he said. "What's fair is fair." After he signed, Claire turned to him, her voice low and urgent. "I know this doesn't fix anything. I know you don't trust me right now, and you shouldn't. But I'm going to earn back your trust, Thomas, however long it takes." Thomas didn't respond, but something in his expression softened slightly. I watched. Them, these two people connected by more than just paper and promises, by the child growing between them. Whatever happened next, at least Claire had proven she was willing to sacrifice her safety net. It was a start. As they prepared to leave, separately, Thomas to the condo and Claire to their house, I touched Claire's arm. "I meant what I said before," I told her. "That baby will always be part of this family." Her eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a chance." Thomas lingered after Claire left, his expression troubled. "Do you think she meant it? Signing the agreement?" "I think," I said carefully, "that actions speak louder than words, and this was a significant action." He nodded, then embraced me suddenly. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom." As I watched him drive away, I felt the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders. I'd done what I could to protect my son and grandchild. The rest was up to them. That night, as I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for arranging the dinner. And for the agreement." It was exactly what I needed. A way to prove I'm serious. "I know you still don't trust me, but I'm going to change that. Claire." I stared at the message for a long time, wondering if I'd just witnessed a genuine step toward redemption or the most sophisticated manipulation yet. Claire's fingers trembled in mine, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who looked so fragile. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In case things don't go well." "You're going to be fine," I said automatically, but she shook her head. "Please, just listen." She took a shaky breath. "I never told anyone this, not even Thomas. When I was 16, I was pregnant once before." My eyes widened, but I remained silent, allowing her to continue. My mother found out and was furious, not because I was pregnant, but because the father wasn't wealthy. She arranged for an abortion, didn't even ask what I wanted. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Afterwards, she sat me down and explained that my looks were my only asset, and I should use them to secure a future, that becoming. A mother would ruin everything unless it was with the right man, the right bank account. I thought of my own mother, who had taught me about dignity and self-respect, and felt a wave of sadness for the young Clare. That doesn't excuse what I did to Thomas, she continued, but when I felt this baby kick, something broke open inside me. I realized I was becoming my mother, seeing people as means to an end, using a child as leverage. She pressed her free hand to her belly. This baby deserves better. Thomas deserves better. And maybe I do too. Her monitor beeped steadily in the background as I absorbed her words. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Because you're the only one strong enough to make sure I don't go back to being that person. Claire's gaze was direct, without artifice. If something happens to me, promise you'll tell my child about this moment, when their mother finally understood what matters. I squeezed her hand. You'll tell them yourself. 2 days later, Clare was released from the hospital, with strict orders for bed rest. The immediate danger had passed, but tension lingered in the air, a fragile peace that might shatter with the slightest pressure. Thomas converted their home office into a temporary bedroom on the first floor, so Clare wouldn't have to climb stairs. I found myself visiting daily, bringing meals and keeping Clare company while Thomas worked. At first, our conversations were stilted, focused primarily on the baby and practicalities. But as days turned into weeks, something unexpected happened. I began to see glimpses of a Clare I had never known, a woman with a dry sense of humor, a passion for classic literature and thoughtful insights about family. I've been thinking about names, she said one afternoon as we sorted through baby clothes I'd brought over. If it's a girl, I'd like to name her Lily. That's pretty, I said, folding a tiny sweater. It was my grandmother's name. She was the only one who ever stood up to my mother. I smiled at the small act of defiance. And if it's a boy? Clare hesitated. I thought maybe James, after your husband, but only if you're comfortable with that. The gesture caught me off guard. Thomas would like that, I said, unable to keep the emotion from my voice. So would I, Clare replied softly. From everything Thomas has told me, his father was a good man. I'd like my son to have that name to live up to. As her due date approached, Clare continued to surprise me. She asked thoughtful questions about raising Thomas, took notes during our conversations about childcare, and even invited me to help decorate the nursery. What do you think about this color? She asked one day, holding up paint swatches. The sage green is lovely, I replied. Very calming. Clare nodded, then hesitated. Would you want to paint something on the wall? Thomas mentioned. You used to paint murals. I hadn't held a paintbrush in years, not since James died. What did you have in mind? Whatever feels right to you. Something the baby would love. 2 weekends later, I found myself painting a forest scene on the nursery wall. Delicate trees with animals peeking from behind them. Thomas watched from the doorway, his eyes misty. Dad would have loved this, he said. Clare, seated in the rocking chair we'd brought from my attic, nodded. I wish I could have known him. A week before Clare's due date, she asked me to join her for tea in their garden. It was a beautiful May afternoon, flowers blooming all around us. I need to ask you something important, she said, her hands cradling her teacup. If Thomas and I renew our vows after the baby comes, would you stand with us as my witness? I studied her face, searching for any sign of the calculating woman I'd first known. But all I saw was sincere hope tinged with uncertainty. You want me as your witness? I clarified, Clare nodded. You're the strongest woman I know, Aurora. You protected your family when I tried to harm it. You showed me what a mother should be. She smiled ruefully. Even when you were protecting Thomas. From me. Before I could respond, Clare gasped, her teacup clattering to the ground. I think my water just broke. What followed was a blur of activity. Calling Thomas, driving to the hospital, the hours of waiting as Clare labored to bring my grandchild into the world. Thomas and I took turns at Clare's bedside. During one of my shifts, she gripped my hand through a contraction, then looked at me with clear eyes. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For giving me a second chance, for showing me what family really means. Tears pricked my eyes, unexpected, but real. You're doing the hard part, I told her. Changing. Lily Aurora Wilson was born at 3:47 the next morning, a healthy 7 pounds, 6 ounces, with Thomas's dark hair and Clare's blue eyes. Holding my granddaughter for the first time, I felt a circle completing, life continuing despite our human complications and failures. Thomas couldn't stop smiling. Clare, exhausted but radiant, watched us with peaceful contentment. She's perfect, I whispered, tracing Lily's tiny fingers. She has a perfect grandmother, Clare said, her voice thick with emotion. And I promise you, Aurora, she will have a mother worthy of her. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, our family gathered in my garden. The rose trellis, now heavy with late blooms, formed a natural arch where Thomas and Clare stood, their daughter cradled between them. We gathered today not for a first union, the minister said, but for a renewal, a choice made with clear eyes and open hearts. I watched as Thomas and Clare exchanged new vows, promises not of blind devotion, but of honest partnership, forgiveness, and growth. Lily cooed in her mother's arms, oblivious to the significance of the moment, yet central to it all the same. When Clare handed me Lily to hold during the ring exchange. She squeezed my hand. Thank you for fighting for us, she whispered. All of us. That evening, after the small reception ended and the house grew quiet, I sat on my porch swing, a light blanket across my knees. The stars were just beginning to appear, and I found myself talking to James as I often did in solitary moments. You would have loved her, James. Not just Lily, though she's perfect, but Clare too, the woman she's becoming. I smiled at the thought. You always said people could surprise you if you gave them the chance. A gentle breeze stirred the wind chimes, their melody sweet in the gathering dusk. When Thomas had first brought Clare home 3 years ago, I'd smiled politely while harboring private doubts. When I'd overheard her true intentions at the baby shower, I'd been certain she could never change. Yet here we were, Clare proving daily that transformation was possible, that people could choose a different path when given the chance, and the clear boundaries to do so. Was she perfect? No. There were still moments when I caught glimpses of old habits, when her insecurities surfaced in sharp comments or defensive posturing. But she was trying, truly trying. And in the end, isn't that all we can ask of anyone? To recognize their flaws and work to overcome them? The porch door opened behind me. Clare stepped out, Lily sleeping against her shoulder. Mind some company? She asked softly. I patted the space beside me on the swing. Not at all. She settled next to me, adjusting Lily's blanket. Thomas is cleaning up. He insisted I take a break. She smiled down at her daughter. Though this little one is hardly work. We sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently beneath us. I was afraid of you, you know, Clare said eventually. From the first day. Afraid? Of me? I chuckled. Why? Because you see people clearly, really see them. Clare stroked Lily's dark hair. I was so used to people seeing what I wanted them to see. But you looked right through me. I considered this. not entirely. I saw the facade, but I missed what was beneath it. The possibility of change. James would have seen that. Claire looked thoughtful. Do you think we're ever really just one person? Good or bad, I mean. No, I said, watching the evening star. Appear. I think we're all capable of both. The question is which one we nurture. Lily stirred, making small snuffling noises before settling back to sleep. She'll have good examples, Claire said, of how to be strong but kind, firm but forgiving. She met my eyes. I'm still learning, but I promise I won't let her down. I know, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. As darkness gathered around us, the 3 generations of women on that porch swing formed a new constellation, one of second chances and hard-won wisdom, of family bonds forged not just by blood, but by choice. And in that quiet moment, under the emerging stars, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger for having been broken and remade.